Israel. Now, many times that is translated as the children of Israel, and sometimes it's translated in some modern translations as the men and women of Israel. But in Hebrew, the word B'nai, the sons of Israel, is that responsibility that Adonai is giving to the men of the congregation to be able to do those things that he has called Kol Israel, the whole of Israel, to do. So you are to order your command, the sons of Israel, to bring me pure olive oil, what we call today extra virgin olive oil, for the light, to keep a flame burning there perpetually. Now, this is oil for the lamp, and we're continuing from last week's study. And so this week, we begin with that idea of sons of Israel, the men. I want you to bring oil. I want you to bring oil, that oil might be pressed. Now, the oil for the menorot, all the menorahs that there are, the lamps, and remember, a menorah is only a lampstand. A lamp stand, it's only a stand for the lamps, plural. It's not a candlestick holder, because in ancient Israel they didn't have candles. Candles were not invented till the Middle Ages. So it was just a stand for the lamps, and on top of the lamps, on top of the lampstand, there was little brackets, and there you would put the lamps. And that oil was not pressed in an oil press. That oil, it says there, beaten. In a sense, it is with what we would call a mano, and you would just beat it and press it, and when you would press it down with that mano that we call in Spanish, the pure oil would come, and it is that oil that lights the lamps. In fact, any of you could do that today. All you need to do is get any kind of virgin olive oil, put it in a little saucer, get a wick. You can make it out of a cotton ball. You could buy a shoestring, as long as it's cotton, and just let it soak there and light it, and you have a lamp. And one thing about olive oil is not flammable. So the oil won't, if it falls, it won't start a fire. It'll turn off automatically. And so we are commanded to bring olive oil to light the lamps on the menorah, to be on perpetually, to be on from this time on and forever. And of course, as long as there is a temple. We don't have a temple today. So many of the instructions, and here's one of the most important things for us. Many of the instructions that have to do with a temple, a priesthood, much of today's study is something that we don't have to do today, because again, no temple, no priesthood. And so one of the things that we always do is we always pray, thy kingdom come. Yeshua taught us to pray, thy kingdom come. When the kingdom comes, the temple will be rebuilt with Yeshua being the high priest, and every aspect of the Levitical priesthood will be restarted over. In fact, that's one of the teachings that a lot of, especially within Christianity, we've never heard before. But the kingdom that is coming is not only about Yeshua reigning as king, which he will. He will also be the high priest of a temple. In fact, the only reason we don't have sacrifices today, and listen to this carefully, the only reason we don't have sacrifices today is because we don't have a temple. Did you know that between 30, when Yeshua died, and 70 AD, for those 40 years, that there was a temple? There was a temple for 40 years after Yeshua died. That temple was still existing, and the sacrificial system was still going on. A lot of people don't realize this, but for those 40 years, the disciples, the apostles of Yeshua, continued going and performing and being part of the sacrificial service after the resurrection. A lot of people don't know that. In fact, in the book of Acts, twice Paul sacrifices. One of the major times when he sacrifices is, remember, he takes a Nazirite vow, and he also pays for the sacrifices for the other gentleman that took the Nazirite vow with him, and he pays for his own sacrifices. When you're done with a Nazirite vow, you have to sacrifice. In the book of Acts, this is after the resurrection, this is Paul. Paul sacrifices in the temple, the existing temple, after the resurrection of Yeshua. This has nothing to do with the idea of Yeshua died for our sins and he paid for our sins by his blood. He did that. Yeshua paid for our sin. He is the Lamb of Elohim who took away the sin of the world. It says he what? Takes away the sin of the world. What a lot of people don't understand, what a lot of people don't realize, is that the sacrificial system was never meant to take away sin. That's where a lot of people, especially within the Judaisms and the Christianisms, there's a lot of Judaisms out there today. There's a lot of Christianisms out there today. And both the Judaisms and the Christianisms think that the sacrificial system was a work system. And they think that that's works. That has nothing, the sacrificial system has nothing to do with works. You sacrificed not because you were paying for your sin. Don't think of the sacrifices as paying for your sin. You sinned, therefore you kill a lamb, and then that pays for your sin, so there you're scot-free. That's not what it, that's what people think, but that's not what it is. What the sacrificial system was, a grace system, a grace-oriented system, as I've said several times before. But to put it in context, especially for those of you that might be visiting or new, the sacrificial system beginning with the first sacrifice. The first sacrifice, according to the book of Revelation, was at the foundations of the world. Now that was the sacrifice of Yeshua. Think of this. Yeshua was the lamb sacrificed before the foundations of the world. Before the world, Yeshua was already there as the sacrificial lamb that paid for the sin at the foundations of the world. And so that right there tells us, in the book of Revelation, in the last book, we're told that. But if we fast forward to Genesis at the beginning, what happened when Adam sinned? When Adam sinned, when you sin, even a little child, a little 2-year-old, 3-year-old, when they sin, and they sin, when they do something naughty, and you catch them doing something naughty, what do? They go hide. They go hide, behind the couch. They go hide someplace in the closet because they know they've been busted. Even a little kid, a little child, a little toddler, even a little baby, as they start doing something that might even be embarrassing to them in their understanding. What did Adam do? Adam started what I always call the first church of the fig leaf. They got, what did they got fig leaves and they hid. And they were hiding from Adonai, and they were putting fig leaves on to hide their guilt and shame even from each other. But Adonai busted them. Adonai caught them. We always try to cover our sin, try to cover up. But Adonai took their fig leaves together, which would have dried up in a day or so, and they would have needed new fig leaves. Adonai did something that was still temporary, but still more permanent. Is Adonai killed the first lamb. The first lamb. Innocent blood was shed. And with the skins of that animal, of that lamb, he clothed them in lambskins. He clothed them in the skins of an animal, covered their guilt and shame by grace through faith. By grace through faith. In other words, the day you eat of it, you will die. The day he ate of it, he died spiritually, soulishly, bodily, physically, to the point that 920 years that body went to the ground. Adonai provided a covering, not a taking away of Adam's sin. Adam's sin could only be taken away by the blood of Messiah, Yeshua. But he covered their sin, a substitute. An innocent died in place of the guilty. Now, if that's not grace, I've often said, what is grace? Someone dying in your behalf. That's not works. You didn't do the work. The Lamb did the work. You didn't sacrifice your life. You didn't spill blood. The Lamb spilled its blood for you, the guilty one. And the sacrificial system from there continued. Abraham sacrificed. The man we call father of many nations, Abraham. Laughter, Isaac sacrificed. The heel catcher, who Adonai changed his name to Prince with El, he sacrificed. Everyone has sacrificed. Did that pay for their sin? No. That gave them the opportunity to bring blood, because it's always been when I see the blood. Adonai is always at when I see the blood. Adonai loves to talk to us, but when he talks to us, when we talk to him, he has to see the blood. In fact, that's the only reason that every one of us here could pray. The only reason every one of us here could pray is because we come with the blood of Yeshua. It says we could come with boldness to the throne of mercy because we come with blood. Anyone who ever comes to Adonai must come with blood. If you don't come with blood, Adonai does not see you, does not speak with you. It's always been that way, and it always will be that way. Without the blood, there is no remission of sin. And the blood of the Lamb, the blood of Yeshua, is what is being pointed to. It's being brought up, the blood of Yeshua, the Lamb, sacrificed before the foundations of the world. The Lamb of Elohim who takes away the sin of the world. His blood, once and for all. Not the blood of bulls and goats. The blood of bulls and goats was never made to take away sin. It was just a way of you saying, I am a sinner. I need a substitute. I need a substitute. And that covered sin. Covered sin. The word atonement does not have to do with taking away sin. It has to do with covering sin. The word kippur is a cover. A kippur is a cover. A kippah is a cover. In fact, today we're going to talk about kippot, kippahs, as coverings. Adonai gave us this as a symbol of covering to the high priest and the priest, of covering, that you're covered. And so, when Adonai brings the new temple, all this that we're talking about here is going to be brought up. And the flame is to be kept going. Aaron and his sons are to set aside this flame in the tent of meeting, outside the veil that is before the testimony. And so the replica of the tent, the Mishkan, has two compartments. The Holy of Holies in the back, and the tent of meeting, or the holy place, in the front, and then the courtyard around. And it says there, this is an irrevocable ordinance for their descendants to kept by the sons of Israel. Irrevocable. Generation to generation, forever. And how long is forever? We keep saying almost every other week. Forever. And so, this is something that should have been kept. In fact, it should be right now. But because of some of our ancestors' disobedience, our temple has been destroyed for 2,000 years. Yeshua prophesied that. Yeshua said, that not one stone is going to be left standing on another, because you did not recognize your opportunity when Elohim offered it. The reason there is no temple in Jerusalem is the rejection of Yeshua as the Messiah, as the Son of the living Elohim. That's why there is no temple. That's the only reason. And Yeshua prophesied that. From among the sons of Israel, summon your brother Aaron and his sons to be priests in my service. Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, Ithamar, sons of Aaron or Aaron. So you are to summon Aaron and his sons to be priests. The word priest is the word Kohen. And what a priest is a mediator. A priest is someone that has their back to the people and their face to Adonai, and brings the people's sacrifices to Adonai, brings the people's prayers to Adonai, and does everything for the people to Adonai. And they were to be these mediators to bring that to Adonai. For Aaron, you are to make sacred vestments to give dignity and magnificence. And so there are vestments of the high priest, and they are to give dignity. Now remember, the Israelites just came from Egypt. They just came from Egypt. Egypt had a lot of pomp and ceremony. Egypt had a lot of musicians and pharaohs and adorned, and their priests and their gods, and they had all this magnificence. What's interesting is that Adonai now calls on Israel and the sons of Aaron not to be priests like they were before. See, in all the ancient world, the firstborn son was a priest. The firstborn sons were priests. If you were a firstborn son, you were a priest, and all you did is offer prayers and sacrifices, mediate between the God, because this is even in pagans. They got it from the Hebrew style. And they were just ordinary people that, did this because they were the firstborn son. But Adonai knows what's going to be happening. Remember, the golden calf incident hasn't chronologically happened. But now, as Moshe is on top of the mountain receiving, Adonai knows what's going on down there. And he knows what's going to happen with the Levites. And he chooses these sons, tells Moses, Aaron and his sons, they are going to be my Kohanim, my mediators. And you are to make sacred vestments, to give them dignity among the people, to give them magnificence, to allow them to be just one step higher so that people could even have that fear. Can you imagine how many of you have been before a judge? Don't raise your hands. I don't want to have someone next to you say, uh-oh, move over. But one of the things that if you go before a judge, can you imagine if that judge was just wearing jeans and a T-shirt and he pronounced, I pronounce you guilty? You probably wouldn't have that much respect for him. Same thing with you have a policeman and he's in full uniform. You have that respect. You look at his badge, you look at his gun, you look, But if some guy just says, he's dressed, unless he's undercover, but then he'll still show you his badge and gun. But if some guy says, I'm a policeman, he's all dressed all down. Anybody could do that. Or even now, sometimes, remember the nurses used to wear all white and they had that little nurses thing? And the doctors used to have that little, it's like, oh, that's a doctor. Now you don't know, everybody wears scrubs from the doctor to the man, doing the floors, the orderly. And so you have to wonder, is he a real doctor or not? And that's what the vestments were all about. And today, I just don't know how Adonai works. Adonai is so good, so perfect. He knows what is coming up. I'm going to have our brother Don Hoffman come up. He's in the back. And here is a replica, as he comes up, a replica of the high priest. John. Or why don't you come up here? And by the way, notice that we have a ramp. And notice that the high priest has floor-length gowns. In the scriptures, if you could stand over here, in the scriptures it talks about having a ramp, not steps. Now, inside the tabernacle, only Elohim would see. There was no people. Remember, there was no people. There was some other priests, but there was no people. But all the priests had to wear floor-length gowns, but he didn't want steps because he says, I don't want to see flesh. So even lifting up the gown in a step, you could see ankle flesh. And Adonai says, I don't want to see, he'll see our feet because they didn't wear shoes, by the way. The high priest and the priest did not wear shoes inside. But he didn't want to see anything above the ankle. Adonai is very modest. Let's learn modesty from Adonai. Let's learn modesty from even the dress of the high priest, which nobody's going to see, but himself, Adonai, and some of the other priests. I'm going to hand the microphone over to our brother so he could explain these before you, and then we will go ahead and go through our rest of what we need to say here.
There's a whole lot of symbolism in all the different parts of the priest's garments, but I'll just do a brief summary of a few of the different things. The high priest was a symbol of Yeshua. He's ministering for us in the heavenly sanctuary. Book of Hebrews talks about that. And so everything on the priest's clothes is all symbolic of Yeshua, his ministry, what he's doing for us. And so I'll start with the bells and the pomegranates. The bells would ring as he was walking. You could hear how much it was ringing as I was walking here. So as the priest was ministering in the heavenly, or in the earthly tabernacle, the people could hear that. They could hear him inside of there. And they were on the outside. They couldn't see him, but they could hear him. They knew that he was ministering by faith. They knew that he was in there working on their behalf and as a mediator. And so that's kind of like for us, Yeshua is ministering in the heavenly temple for us, and we can know that by faith. We can't see him, but we can know by faith, just like the Israelites could know that their priest was ministering in there. And there was bells and pomegranates on the hem of the garment. And the Jewish tradition is that there was supposed to be the same number of bells as pomegranates. And if that's true, it would be a very good symbol of how what we say, the noise we make with our mouths, is supposed to equal the fruit that is seen in our lives. The fruit is supposed to equal the talk. And that's, as we're kings and priests as well, and that's a principle for us. And you see there was first the white garment. That was a symbol of Yeshua's pure white robe of righteousness. And he wants to give that to us. He wants to clothe us with pure white robes of righteousness. We aren't high priests here on earth, but we're kings and priests. And as his bride, as his church, he wants to clothe us with his pure white robe of righteousness. And next is the blue. That was a very expensive color. It came from probably snail shells. There was just a tiny bit of this blue dye in each snail shell. And so they had to have a lot of them, and they were hard to get. So there was a very expensive color, and the blue represents Yahweh's law. You're probably familiar with it was very likely that the Ten Commandments were made out of blue sapphire stone. That's been a Jewish tradition for a long time, and you can find it when Moses is going up to get the tablets of the stone. Yahweh says, first the elders see the blue sapphire pavement under Yahweh's throne, and Yahweh says, I'm going to give you tablets of the stone. And the stone it was just talking about was the blue sapphire underneath his throne. And Ezekiel saw that as well. He saw the blue sapphire like the heavens in its clearness. And that's why he told them to put the blue thread in the tassels on their clothes to remind them of his Torah, that they were to be his commandment-keeping people, just like we are nowadays. The book of Revelation says, blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates into the city. That's instructions for us. So that's what the blue represents. So every time you see the blue sky, every time you see the tassels, whatever, anytime you see the color blue, that's to remind us that we're to be his commandment-keeping people. And the red represents Yeshua's blood that's shed for us so that we can be saved. And the purple represents royalty. Yeshua is royalty. And he wasn't just any common person. He was the Son of God. He was a royal, he had royal heritage. And when he adopts us as his children through baptism, we become royalty too. That's why we're kings and priests. So that's what the purple color represents. And there was the 12 stones. Each stone had one of the tribes of Israel engraved on it. And that represents how Yeshua is carrying us on his heart. The high priest would carry those stones on his heart when he was ministering in the tabernacle. So Yeshua is carrying us on his heart. And also on the shoulder pieces, there was 6 tribes carved on each shoulder piece. And that's, again, like Yeshua is carrying us on his shoulders as he ministers in the heavenly temple. And then the crown, there was a gold crown across the priest's forehead that said holiness to Yahweh on it. And in the book of Revelation, it says the 144,000 have the Father's name written in their foreheads. It also says they have the seal of God written in their foreheads. So that's the seal of God is equivalent to the Father's name. And that's referring to the symbolism of the crown that was on the priest's forehead. And that crown was tied with a blue ribbon. And the blue ribbon represents Torah keeping. And of course, we can't do that on our own, but he can give us the power to keep his Torah. And that's what kept the crown from falling off. If we aren't keeping his Torah, the seal of God can't be on our foreheads. It's going to fall off. That gold crown will fall off without the thread to keep it on. And the Father's name represents his character. So it's the same as having the Torah written in our hearts. The Torah is a transcript of his character. And so if we have his Torah written in our hearts, that new covenant promise, then that's the seal of God can be put on our foreheads. So that's the symbolism of that part. And then the white on top represents purity. Our heads are to be covered with purity. We're not to have impure thoughts entering our minds, thoughts running around inside of our minds. We're not supposed to let anything impure into our minds. And we'll be talking later this afternoon about comparing the human body to the tabernacle and to the head. And nothing impure could come into the tabernacle. It was to be kept pure. The priests weren't even to bring particles of dust from the outside into the inside. And so that's how our lives are supposed to be too. We have to be very careful what we allow to come into our minds. And this is to remind us that we're to be pure. So that's a very brief summary. And you may wonder, there's one stone on each side here. And that's the Urim and Thummim. Some people think they're on the inside. Some people think they're on the outside. It's, I guess, a matter of interpretation. But that's what the extra 2 on the 2 sides are. And that's how they would inquire of Yahweh. They would ask questions. One would light up, or the other one would have a cloud over it, depending on yes or no. So that's how the priest would inquire. You read about that in the scriptures, when the priest was going to inquire of Yahweh about some question they had. So that's a very brief summary. There's a whole lot more that could be said about it, but we'll be talking more about this afternoon about some of those things in connection with the tabernacle.
And I would encourage every one of you to stay afterwards or go home and get a quick sandwich if you need to and come back. But because this is an excellent presentation, the video last night was, the PowerPoint was excellent, and the putting on the virtual reality goggles and being able to even pet the lambs and see each part of it was excellent. Well, thank you, brother. And just, oh man, it's going to be good tonight, this afternoon. And you're welcome to take pictures with him afterwards if you like. $25 per shot. No. Hallelujah. Let's wait till he goes to the back. In Jerusalem, not too long ago, they did find a bell, a teeny little bell, and that was part of the high priest, and it was found there on the southeast area of the Temple Mount, and which is where the high priest would pass, and at some point in time, maybe someone taking the robes. And by the way, just a little insight here. These robes were used primarily once a year at Yom Kippur, as we're going to see. Another thing about that is that the priests, when they went into the Temple Mount and into the temple area, later on, we don't have any indication in tabernacle times, but the priests wore civilian clothes outside and only wore their clothing inside. In the Second Temple period, in the time of Yeshua, the Romans had taken the high priest's clothing and had kept it in the Antonia fortress. So on Yom Kippur, the high priest had to go knock at the door of the Romans and borrow the clothing, because that was a symbol of subjection over the Jews. And so the high priest had to borrow them only for Yom Kippur. Now, whenever you see Jesus films, sometimes you see one or two priests wearing the ephod and wearing all the breastplate and dressed as high priest. At Passover, the priest would not dress as high priest. By the way, there was only one high priest, not two or three. The second in command did not wear until the last one died, or in Second Temple period time, when the next priest paid more money to be the high priest, because by that time they were paying money for that. And so over here it goes on to say, and it gives the pectoral, the ephod, the robe, the embroidered tunic, the turban, and the girdle, which is the belt. And then it explains each and every one of them. In chapter 28, and many of you have already been doing that, reading that. Go to 28, verse 30. To the pectoral of judgment, or the breastplate of judgment, you will add the Urim and the Thummim, so that Aaron may have on them, on his breast, when he goes to Yahweh's presence. Thus, in his presence, Aaron will continually bear on his breast the oracle of the sons of Israel. I'm going to stop here for a second. What's interesting about the Urim and the Thummim, the Urim comes from the word or, which is light. So the word Urim means, in plural, it means lights. And Thummim means perfections. Now, what's interesting about this is the Urim and the Thummim are clouded in mystery. This is the first time we hear about these articles. Now, these articles, for what people have been able to deduce from Scripture, we really don't know what they were. In fact, we don't even know where they came from. It just mentions them here. It doesn't, in everything we've already said, it says, you shall make. No, remember last week we were talking about, you shall make, you shall make, you shall make, you shall make, you shall make. Notice that you will never have, you shall make an Urim and a Thummim. It doesn't say you shall make. And here's the question. Did they have these, if they were articles or stones or whatever? Again, there's several theories as to what they were or how they, as our brother said, lit up. They're it doesn't say, there's no, the Septuagint. The Septuagint is the first translation of the Hebrew scriptures into any language, and was translated into Greek. The Greek words that were used for the Urim and the Thummim was the word in Greek manifestations and truth. Truths. And they're in the plural, both of them. Manifestations and truths. The word manifestation is also another word for teaching. Another word for teachings and truth. Now, when the Latin was translated from the Greek. So the Latin words for Urim and Thummim is doctrina et veritas, which is doctrina is manifestations or teachings, and veritas is the Latin word for truth. And so we don't know what this lights and perfections are. We don't know what the Urim and Thummim is. We don't know what manifestations and truth, what doctrina et veritas is. We don't know where they came from. We don't know where they went. Nobody knows whatever happened to them. They're not found any place except here and in the temple period. Before the temple period, we don't hear them. Before the tabernacle period, we don't hear them. We don't hear them with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We don't hear them. This is the first time, and look what it says. The way it says, when Aaron enters the sanctuary, he will bear the names of the sons of Israel on his breast, and to call them to mind continually in the presence of Yahweh. To the pictorial of judgment, you will add. You will what? Add the Urim and the Thummim. That means that they already had them. You will add that to the pictorial of judgment. But where did they come from? We don't know. Where did they go? We don't know. We don't know too much about this. In fact, we don't even know how they work. We think, and again, there's ideas and how they worked, how they might have been in, or how they might have been on the outside. Again, if you study this, you won't come up with straight answers, because this is one of those secret things. The secret things belong to Yahweh. The revealed things belong to us and our children. But you know what? On this point, it hasn't been revealed. That means at this point, we don't need to know. So don't worry about it. Don't, just say, it's, by the way, always remember this. It's okay to say, I don't know about any Bible question. I don't know a lot. In fact, I don't know more than I know, I think. Okay. And then we have the robe. And verse 35, it says, Aaron is to wear it when he officiates, so that the tinkling of the bells will be heard whenever he enters the sanctuary into Yahweh's presence or leaves it. Thus he will not die. And so they are to be heard from the outside. Of course, we have the diadem, which the diadem is the crown, and then the turban. Now, I noticed that our brother's turban is puffy. The word turban actually in the Hebrew here means a wrap. So it was probably wrapped in a form as turbans, and the English word turban comes from turn and bind, a bind, a bend, to bind something around is what the word turban actually means in the Hebrew. And so it's possible that they, again, we don't have strict guidelines in Scripture as to how everything was made. All we have is some words like the word turban, which means a bind, to bind around. Let's see. For the sons of Aaron, verse 40, you are to make a tunic, a girdle, and a headdress. By the way, all the priests, including Aaron and his sons, wore the same outfits down the generations. The high priest had these 4 others, but they all had the regular things. And the sons of Aaron always wore a headdress, a covering. Whenever a minister has always, not just in the Hebraic model. The Hebraic model, by the way, is the original model. Other countries, other religions, other faiths have always stolen and counterfeited the Hebraic model. And it's interesting that even after this, in the time of the Romans and the Greeks, other religions used little hats in ministering and things like that. But when you ministered unto Adonai as a minister inside the place of ministry, the place, the altar, and an altar, and this tabernacle, I want you to look at that tabernacle, that tent. It's a tent as a portal between Israel and Yahweh, as a portal between mankind and Yahweh. And even if you look at that in those manners, Yeshua is our tabernacle also. And so he is our, well, we could use the word portal to the Father. One of the things that we always need to understand also is that, and this is very important in prayer, it's a little different maybe from what you're used to, but biblical prayer is directed at the Father. When the disciples asked Yeshua, teach us how to pray, Yeshua says, when you pray, pray as this or pray like this. He didn't say pray this, he pray like this. Our Father who art in heaven. And so prayer according to Yeshua is directed at Papa, at Abba, at our Father. But when we come not in our own name, not in our own authority, but in the name of Yeshua. We don't pray to Yeshua. We don't pray to the Holy Spirit. In fact, to many people, Yeshua, the Father, has been taken out of the way and everything is directed to Yeshua. No, Yeshua is the mediator. In fact, one of the things that you will find over here is you'll find 3 entrances. The entrance to the court, the entrance to the holy place, and the entrance to the Holy of Holies. And there's levels of sanctity in the tabernacle and in the temple of Solomon and later on the temple of Herod. Levels of sanctity, and the holiest of holies is the inner sanctum where the Ark of the Covenant was, and then the holy place, and then the courtyard where the sacrifices come in. And when we come in, the first thing you'll notice on here is that you will notice that the altar's there. Before you come to the Father, where's the first place you have to stop? At the altar of sacrifice. That's where Yeshua's blood was given to the Father, as the first fruits on Resurrection Day. It was a Yom Rishon. It was a first day of the week. And in the morning, when Miriam comes, Yeshua had resurrected as the sun went down. Yeshua had resurrected as the sun went down on what we call Saturday night. And he resurrected, And in the morning, before it was light, Miriam and the women come to the tomb. And already the tomb was empty. It had already been resurrected several hours of our time. And then there they go, and then they come back, and Miriam is there. And she sees the gardener. And she goes to the gardener and says, "Where have you taken our master?" And remember, Yeshua, the resurrected Yeshua, says, "Miriam." And it says, "Rabboni." And she goes and she tries grabbing him by the feet. And he says, "Do not touch me, for I have not ascended to the Father." When Yeshua ascended to the Father, at 9 o'clock on the morning on Yom Rishon is when the sin sacrifice is done. And Yeshua ascends to the Father, and he offers his blood as the taking away of the sins of the world. His blood once and for all in the heavenly tabernacle, not the tabernacle of this earth, but in the heavenly tabernacle, in the heavenly altar, which this is only a replica, as we will see this afternoon on that excellent PowerPoint. Yeshua offers his blood. Now, that afternoon, that evening, Yeshua tells his disciples what? "Touch me and see that I am not a spirit." He says, "Watch me eat." And he asks them for food. And they give him a piece of broiled fish and some honey and a honeycomb. Yeshua gets the fish and the honeycomb, and he eats it in front of their eyes. In other words, he's not a ghost. He's not a spirit. He is our resurrected Messiah, the Son of the living Elohim. And then he goes out through the wall. He just vanishes, and they're there. And he appears to them several times. And so one of the things that we know is that this idea of what Adonai is doing with the temple system is to teach us by even the smallest little clasp, the smallest little golden ring, even the colors, everything is to teach us about Messiah. Okay, a couple of other things I wanted to cover today is that this is an irrevocable ordinance, again, forever. And so let's go to 29, verse 4. "You are to bring Aaron and his sons to the entrance of the tent of meeting, and there they are to be bathed or washed." Now the word taval, baptized, or a mikvah word is not used here. But the idea of a washing, the first thing you hit is the altar of sacrifice. But after the altar of sacrifice comes the washing. And what's important about the washing, and here's where we have this idea of a purification rite. We believers in Yeshua, from the time of Torah, and we're going to be told how to purify clothing, how to purify dishes. If a little animal dies on a dish, we're told how to purify that dish. Some dishes cannot be purified, and they have to be broken and thrown away. And so one of the things is we're told how to do everything, how to be purified, because these are symbolic terms for us being a holy, separated people. And in a sense, that's what baptism is. Now, always remember, does baptism save? And the answer is no. Nobody has ever been saved by being baptized. In fact, there's people that go into the baptismal waters a dry sinner and they just come out a wet sinner. Baptism doesn't save. It doesn't take sin away. But Peter tells us that baptism or immersion, and by the way, baptism is by immersion. The word baptizo in Hebrew taval means to immerse. To immerse means to put under. A lot of people say, I was baptized. Well, how were you baptized? Oh, I was sprinkled. How many of you were baptized as a baby? No, nobody was baptized as a baby. You were sprinkled as a baby. But sprinkling is not baptism. I was immersed by having water sprinkled on me. That doesn't even make sense. Or some people pour water. If someone, when you were a baby, poured water on you or sprinkled you with water, you're not baptized. You're not baptized. You need to be immersed. Immersion is the way of cleansing. In fact, again, even with dishes have to be immersed for them to be ritually clean. And Adonai wants us to be ritually clean on the outside, but only the death of Yeshua could make us clean on the inside. The outside ritual, the coming here in the mikvah and going underwater, that's just a ritual. But Peter says this is the result. It doesn't take dirt away. This is just the result of a good conscience. In other words, baptism doesn't save you. But if you say you're saved and you don't want to be baptized, something's wrong. Something's terribly wrong if you say, oh, I don't need to be baptized. Oh, I'm going to go to heaven. I'm saved. I believe all that, but I don't want to be baptized. It's impossible. If you've never been immersed, please come Wednesday night, and you can be part of the immersion. And immersion, baptism, after the sacrifice of Yeshua. In fact, I'm going to take a little road trip here, but go with me to the Brit Chadashah, to the apostolic writings. Go with me to the book of Romans first. And in the book of Romans, we're specifically told that the Torah won't save us. We're not saved by Torah, but we're saved for Torah. But in the book of Romans, chapter 6, verse 1, does it follow that we should remain in sin so as to have and let grace have greater scope? Of course not. We are dead to sin. So how can we continue to live in it? Have you not been taught that when we were immersed in Messiah, Yeshua, we were immersed in his death? In other words, when we were immersed, we went into the tomb with him and joined him in death. So that as Messiah was raised from the dead by the Father's glory, we too might live a new life. If in union with Messiah we have imitated his death, so shall we also imitate him in his resurrection. So baptism, going under the water, is symbolic of dying to the old man, dying to the old self. Now, going under doesn't take the sin away. That has to be a relationship that you've done with Adonai through Yeshua and asking Adonai to forgive you your sin, returning, teshuvah in Hebrew, returning to the Father by the power of Yeshua and knowing that your debt has been nailed to the cross. Every one of us has a debt. Every one of us has a jacket. You know, there's these angels that have your file, and they're writing everything down. We call that a jacket, you know, in prison lingo. And that jacket is all the things against you. But Adonai took that record of debt, and the record of debt, he nailed it to the cross. And that record of debt with you, because that record of debt is who you are. That's who we are. That's who we are in his eyes. Now, among us, we're real santitos. But under his eyes, no matter how good we are, our righteousness is as filthy rags to him. The best we could do is as filthy rags to him. And so when we come to him, we come with this jacket. And we come, and that jacket, it says that record of debt was nailed to the cross. And we were nailed to the cross. And baptism is only symbolic of what he did 2,000 years ago, where we went under and we are raised a new person. We are a new creature, a new creation. The old has passed. The old is gone. We are no longer that person. And one thing we always say this, is I am not the man, thank Adonai. No, how do we say it? I am not the man I want to be, but thank Adonai, I'm not the man I used to be. I'm not him. But there's still a future for us that will grow over and over. Well, I'm losing time here. Just a couple of more tidbits. Okay, let's go back to the book of Exodus. And there's a couple more things that I want to give before we close here. Let's see. There was a sacred meal after that, the investiture of priests, where they take the challah bread and they take the unleavened cakes and unleavened challah, and there was leavened challah and unleavened challah. There was wafers, unleavened wafers, which were a kikar around. The word kikar means a circle, and so there we have these unleavened wafers that in English calls wafers, that probably about that thick, round circles. Here in New Mexico, what do we call them? Tortillas, okay. So that's what they actually, literally that's what they actually had. Plus the loaves, and the word loaf there is the word challah, and the challah bread, and that's leavened. And so they offered this, and they had the meal, and they ate of the sacrifices. One of the most important things about the sacrificial system, again, very symbolic. When you make a sacrifice, those that eat of that sacrifice are partakers, and covering is made for those who partake of the meat, for those who partake of the drink, for those who partake of the bread. Very symbolic with Yeshua. Very symbolic with Pesach that's coming. And when you partake of the meal of Passover, you're actually partaking in those sacrifices. And they are investured, they are put on and their robes, and an altar of incense, chapter 30. And Aaron is to burn the sacred incense there at 9 o'clock. And it's interesting that originally, and we don't know when it changed, but originally the morning sacrifice was at sunrise and the evening sacrifice was at sundown. In second temple period, the times were at 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. But in the Hebrew, it says that these were to be done, and the lighting of the lamps, by the way, were to be done. There was a morning when the lights were turned off as it became light, and when it got dark between the two evenings. And it uses the term between the two evenings, which is right after sundown, before it gets dark and before the three lights came up. And so again, like I said, we have so much to speak, but we have a little time. And so join us on Wednesday nights. Every Wednesday, you are invited to come and join us for Q&A. Anyone is welcome to come and ask any question from the scriptures publicly. We don't have nothing to hide here. If you have any question that you want to ask about scripture, please come on Wednesday nights, and we are here. Go home now and go get something to eat. Some of you could stay if you want to. And our brother Sean is going to be working on the model. And we're going to have a good time the rest of the afternoon. Let's stand. Yevarechecha Yahweh va'ish merecha. Ayir Yahweh panav elecha vichunecha. Asa Yahweh panav elecha vayasem lecha. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day.